Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Cass with College of Lore.
I am
Hey, why are you me? Stop stealing my identity on the internet.
Identity theft is a card game. I am the Penitent with College of Lore.
Identity theft is a crime, bro. Stop stealing my vibes.
And today we're talking to you about a very serious topic on a very special episode of Let's Talk About.
Is it special? What? Hello?
Because today we're talking about death.
Okay, I know that. Why is this a special episode? Did you just say that to sound cool? Like, I'm lost here. I know we're recording this, but, like, I'm lost. Give me a map. What are we doing here? Is this, like, International Death Day or something?
I realize this might be a little bit before your time. Oh, now I feel old.
Oh, I'm sorry. Embarrassing.
So, on old, like, early 2000s, 90s TV shows.
Okay.
If there was an episode about, like, death or divorce or drugs, they'd say, like, oh, this is a very special episode of, like, Degrassi or whatever.
Okay.
Well, now I'm embarrassed.
Isn't that the guy who talks about, like, space? I'm kidding, I know what that show is. I'm just fucking with you.
Hey, Drake's on that show.
Oh, hey. Anyway. Sorry, we're talking about character death in this one.
Yes.
Longest, most annoying intro ever. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel that I'm talking to you on right now.
Someday we'll make a more annoying intro.
No,
Someday
we'll
just shriek.
No, oh, okay. If you're giving me permission to scream into my microphone, I will do it.
So.
Like and subscribe. We're on the road to 150 subscribers by the end of the year. You can do it. You can get us there. Also, join our Patreon. Thank you to our current patrons, Remy Sweet and Of Winter. Join our Patreon so you can give me money to buy cool snacks and send me chips.
So, let me ask you about death.
Okay. I feel kind of, like, threatened by the way you said that.
Do you have to die?
Like, in general, yes.
More specifically,
I guess.
Does an RPG game have to have death in it?
I mean, like, presumably if you're killing enemies.
Okay, well...
Like, I guess you could run a no-combat game, or, like, a combat game that's like a fucking, like, Undertale pacifist run. You can do that, I guess, if you want.
Character death.
Do they not all count as characters? Now I'm just being annoying on purpose. Now I'm just pissing you off. Yeah, no, you don't have to. But it's compelling.
Yes.
Especially, like, not even player character death. NPC death especially is very compelling.
Yeah. So,
but player character death is compelling as well if done in the right circumstances and with permission.
If you've heard some of our game tales...
People die in our games.
Molly Mock in our home game, the PvP that made our whole table cry, those both have either very relevant NPC or active player character death in them.
Yep. And you love to see it sometimes. It's fine, don't worry about it.
Let's say that you're a DM. Or you're a player.
Mm-hmm.
And your group has kind of collectively decided, we don't want death in this game.
Yeah.
We don't want our characters to die. Or at least to stay dead.
Yeah.
Is that okay? How do you handle that?
Well, I personally don't really like player character death. I get very attached. I have issues with death that we've talked about off-screen plenty. I don't like unresolvable conflicts. The whole point of tabletop gaming for me is that every situation is fixable and I can control my experience with a story, and I don't really want to have scenarios that I can't change in a story that's meant to be escape for me from the horrors of reality or whatever. There are a lot of those. So I personally would prefer to never have anyone permanently stay dead. But that doesn't mean it's not a really compelling narrative tool, and it can be great for a revenge arc, it can be great for a character growth arc. There are a lot of reasons that it's really worthwhile, and as a DM, I know that you are not at all uncomfortable with character death, and even permanent death. And that is hard for me to balance, because like I said, I'm not the most comfortable with things dying and never coming back. I have struggled with that a lot in my real life. But I don't think it's bad, either way. I have no problem with a table coming to me and saying, we don't want our characters to stay dead. If they die in combat or whatever, that's fine, but I want a way to bring them back. I want a way to resurrect them or work them into the story again. I'm fine with that. I'm always going to be fine with that.
So as a player, I always let my GM know, hey, I'm fine with character death. I'd like to have a conversation after
Yeah,
the session,
to decide what we'll do about it.
talk about how I want to go forward.
Talk about, do you want to make a new character, or do you want to find a way to work them back in? Do you want a temporary new character? How soon do you want that worked back in so we can adapt? And I honestly think it's kind of a good idea to talk to the other players about that as well.
There are points of the character where I'm like, this whole arc seems unresolved.
It's not narratively satisfying.
Whatever that takes.
But there are also some character deaths that, like, as much as it hurts me to say, there are some deaths that are so much more valuable if they're left at the conclusion of their narrative arc.
I mean, not to bolster our own content.
Yeah.
But the game tale this week is so much more narratively fulfilling that if that's a permadeath,
Yeah.
that is permanent.
The one from last week or the one that we're telling this
The Kazintra.
Yeah.
Yeah. The one that we just released on Sunday, if you want to check that out.
Go check it out. It was cool. God, that made me cry so hard. We're having a whole breakdown. The whole table was losing it.
Are other times where it makes a lot of sense for things to come back. And
sometimes it's just funny.
Yes.
Like with the Molly story.
Maybe something like
sometimes it's just fucking hilarious.
Something like that where it's separate.
You come back different,
they come back different
wrong, or whatever. Yeah.
So there are some instances where I would like to say that, like, there are three categories of deaths in my mind. There are deaths that should never be undone.
Yes.
There are deaths that should take a significant amount of effort to undo. And there are deaths that should effortlessly be undone.
Yes.
And I am really, really wary of the first and last category.
Yeah. I think all of these things should have consequences. I don't think really there's very many situations at all where someone should get off scot-free after dying.
There's only one time I have ever, as a DM, said, you get back to wherever you were getting back to, and you're immediately met by clerics who revive the fallen.
Yes.
And that was because you lost.
Yes.
You were in that game.
Yeah. Which one are you talking about?
So, it was a Storm King Slender game.
Oh yeah, I feel like I remember
where,
now.
To basically summarize, the party was there to free Hackathon, was fighting Ymrith and the Kraken at the same time, which they were leveled for, and they had the firepower to do, but they had some really bad rolls.
They sure did.
They managed to chase off Ymrith, the dragon, in that campaign. But the Kraken had so much health.
Yeah.
And they had, like, 2 people still standing.
Yep.
And one of those people got thrown off the ship almost immediately.
Help. Get them back on there this instant.
And they did get back on. But Hackathon just dragged the Kraken to the depths.
Yeah.
And died, drowned.
Yeah.
So, in that situation where there were 3 characters who failed their death saves and died on the boat, I'm like, you already failed.
Yeah.
You already lost.
And also, it makes narrative sense for you to be able to go back to someone who can heal you.
You already failed, you already lost. You got rid of Ymrith, you exposed Ymrith, you exposed...
You did your job, but you lost in another terrible consequential way. And also, you're going back to a place with a lot of clerics, so we may as well.
You already suffered a massive loss. I'm not going to compound this. And, part of it was, it's the end of the session, I don't want to end this on a massive downer. And I knew the people playing those characters, at least one of which was an NPC, the people connected to those characters wouldn't have wanted them to stay dead.
Yeah.
One of them had a very notable revenge arc going on that could not have ended there. Actually, 2 of them did.
Oh, I don't remember who you're talking about. Which game was this?
This was the Molly camp. This is actually the...
Is this the Every campaign?
Yes.
Is
this is actually the same as Molly Mock in our home game, Jester in our home game, and the Gay Homophobe stories.
God, all of the stories are so good. Not that I'm biased.
But 2 of those players, Scorn and Yasha, had revenge arcs going on at the moment.
Revenge arcs. And, honestly not entirely dissimilar at some points, because both of them were really mad about Molly.
Although I will say, both of them, or all 3 people who died, had reincarnate, not, resurrection cast on them.
Yes.
So all of them changed in some significant way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So
That was a whole process. It was crazy.
So what I'm saying is there are very few situations where I would go for you get brought back instantly. That is basically it, where they've already suffered something else.
And where it still makes narrative sense for them to have a way to be brought back.
Yes. Ideal, I had a great setting set up because they could return to the Storm Kingdom. They could return to basically this opulent palace that would have plenty of jewels and ability to cast these spells.
Yes.
If you are a DM out there and you are like sitting on your throne of first edition D&D books and saying, there is no resurrection in my game, all death is permanent, yada yada yada, that's fine.
But
Tell
your players have
in
to
session
be okay
0.
with that. Yeah. Make sure... Have a session 0.
Yes.
And make sure your players know that that's where you stand, because there are plenty of people who won't be comfortable with that. I wouldn't be comfortable with that, probably.
I could be.
Especially if there's a lot of chance that something will be unresolved. Even if there's going to be a permanent death, I need there to be a resolution of the arc there, or I will, lose my mind. I have problems, and I'm not going to go into my, mental trauma on this channel, but, that would be really impossible for me to process.
I could be fine.
This is not a game where I want to explore that.
I could be fine with that, but I would need to build my character differently than how I would build someone that I'm going for a long-form thing.
Yeah. And that would not work for me at all.
No.
And that's fine. You're also allowed to not fuck with that at all. You can
There
do whatever you want in this game forever.
Are some players, very famous, popular players even, there's a notable clip that's gone around of Marisha Ray.
Yes,
who
I love it.
Basically, so major campaign 3 spoilers here. Go ahead and skip.
Yeah, skip to, just, honestly, we're probably almost done with the video. Don't even watch the rest of it. If you don't want campaign 3 spoilers, we're gonna talk about them right now.
Her character, Laudna, dies.
Horribly.
And the kind of production crew came up to her and they're like, so what's your thought for a character?
Yeah. What are we going to do for your new character? Let us know as soon as you can, because we got to get concept art, we got to get character art all done up. And she was like, no. It is the funniest video ever. She's just like, no, I'm not doing it. Yeah. We're fixing her. We're bringing her back.
There was no room for discussion. Obviously, that had been prearranged with Matt and stuff. But there was no room
was not
for,
having it.
She is playing Laudna to the bitter end.
Yeah. And it wasn't resolved.
No.
And so that made sense.
And they hadn't really gotten to a lot of her stuff, which made a lot of sense.
And then they did. Shortly after, I might add.
So...
God. She's so cool.
Yeah. It's 100% understandable to be... You're not wrong for saying, I don't want my character to die, and I don't want my character to die unresolved.
Yes.
Plenty
of people don't want that, including, like we just said, very relevant, influential D&D players that you see on, actual plays and stuff.
Very few popular actual plays have permanent character death.
Because it's hard to process, honestly, for a lot of people. Listen, if watching or playing or both D&D or any TTRPG is your escape from reality, it makes a lot of sense to not want to handle permanent death of something you're probably really invested in. And that's what my problem with it is. I am using this often to cope with reality, and if I can't... my whole issue a lot of the time is I can't fix every problem in my life, and I don't like that feeling. I don't like the idea of not having control of my own story. And if I can't have that in real life, I may as well have it in games.
The most popular D&D show in the world has had 2 permanent player character deaths.
Yep.
Ever.
Yep.
And... Well, okay, 3 if you want to count the end of a campaign, but I don't.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, that being said, death can really be impactful.
It can. Especially if it's either narratively satisfying or it just hits right in the moment. Even if it's not the conclusion of an arc, if it makes sense for them to die and come back, like with the Molly story. Yeah. It makes sense. It can be really compelling and narratively satisfying to have someone die, even if they're going to come back.
I point to mid-early campaign 2 of Critical Role as an example.
Yep.
Molly's death there.
That was, 1, changed the entire course of the campaign to a pretty significant degree, and 2, massive character growth for, everyone in the party recovering from that experience. Some characters more than others, but everyone to a degree.
Jacob of XP Level 3, shout out to that channel, by the way, said it best talking about that campaign where the Mighty Nine were too cocky and they needed a loss.
Yes.
And that was that loss.
And that was that loss, and it didn't weaken... It weakened their party dynamic for a little while, but it brought them together in a very different way. Molly was the heart of that party, and in losing that, they lost a lot of confidence and had to build that back closer.
Yeah. So...
Death is a devastating thing, both in-game and especially in real life, but it's something that you can recover from and you can heal from, and it can create lasting bonds and connections as you learn to navigate those feelings and cope with them. And that was really well reflected in that campaign.
There are good permanent deaths, and there are good non-permanent deaths, and there are bad permanent deaths, and there are bad non-permanent deaths.
Yes.
And
all of that decision should be about what the players and DM want and what feels good narratively.
Yeah. If you're all sitting there and you're like, hey, I think that character's death was really meaningful and really impactful, and I don't think there's a better ending where that character could have gone out. I've talked a lot about how this will be a future game tale, but the only time I've ever awarded... one of the only 2 times I've ever awarded a Deeds point in a Burning Wheel game was to this scoundrel, rogue, pickpocket thief character who got attached to this kid during the course of the campaign and gave her life for this kid.
Yeah.
And that was a death that no one at the table felt like undoing.
Yeah. And that makes sense. Because it's extremely impactful and conclusive to that person's story.
Yes.
And that's good.
If the death is a good narrative end, I think it's good to let it lay there.
Yeah.
But there are some things where... I'm not a fan of using major character death for quick shock.
Yeah, I don't like using death for shock value, because that's not how it should work in games.
I'm fine using death for shock value, but only in the sense of... if you can make it hurt in a way that matters.
Yeah, that's fair. Shock value at all is maybe not the right phrasing.
To point to something entirely on D&D related.
Yeah.
The kind of senseless murder that happens via Negan in The Walking Dead is a really good example of death that hurts.
Yeah.
And death that inspires something in, for lack of a better term, the PCs, the rest of the characters.
Yes.
There have been situations where I've had people win fights and go back to the home village to see it in flames.
Yep. There are ways to make it hurt, and sometimes you need to make it hurt to drive something home. But that doesn't mean that there should be no way to recover from that, mentally or by resurrection.
No. And there are... we talked about last week on the villains, Zadal accepting a sacrifice to spare someone and then just saying, I lied, and killing them.
Yeah.
That was a hugely impactful moment, even though it
was terrible, but it was really character defining for everyone in the scene.
And it made everyone despise that character permanently more
that
than
villain was officially hated more than anyone else in the game, even though there were definitely people who had committed worse crimes. But just because it was so personal.
The entire table reaction to that.
Yeah. No, that was crazy. I remember that, and I was really mad about it.
Yes. Basically just... we think that death is kind of...
it should serve a narrative purpose.
Yes. But it should always serve a narrative purpose. There is a temptation...
especially if you're playing a game that's heavy narrative.
There's a temptation, both with D&D and writing books or video games or movies, to say, hey, I've gone a long while without a death of an important character. Do I need to jump on that?
And the answer is not usually, in my opinion.
Not unless your story really warrants it.
If that's the point of the theme of your story, yeah. But otherwise, you probably don't need to do it every little while just for the sake of doing it. If you're killing people for the sake of killing people in a certain frequency, that's kind of weird in my opinion.
I will often do it as establishing a villain.
Yes. That is a good reason.
Either establishing how powerful a new villain is, I've had a new villain... they weren't even named party characters, but we had this big board in Waterdeep of adventuring parties. And to establish how fucked up this new villain was, when the party got back to Waterdeep and saw the Adventurers Guild, they saw that half the top 50 names were just wiped off.
Yeah.
And were being moved.
Yep.
Or one really impactful kill from a villain to a party member to establish, okay, we hate this guy, like the moment I just talked about with
Yeah.
Zidal lying. I think that death is a useful tool, but I think that you should be careful how you use it, and that resurrection is also a useful tool, and you need to be careful at how you use it.
Yeah.
If
Everything should be handled appropriately, and again, everything should be done with player consent.
yes,
All of these things can be really useful, but if your players really aren't comfortable with it one way or another, you need to respect that. And you need to find a group who's fine with doing it the way you are.
If you are
and vice versa, if you're a player.
If you're a player and you are struggling with your own death,
My first advice is
yeah.
talk to your DM and see
like-
what they can do about it.
a lot of people will tell you to get over it or to look at new things to get excited about. And if the death is really narratively satisfying, I get that.
And it can be hard, even if it's narratively satisfying.
It'll suck regardless, even if it's really narratively satisfying. But if you really think, like, hey, I'm unsatisfied with it, you know,
I feel like there was more that I needed to do, and I'm not getting to do it now. I should talk to my DM about it. Please do that.
There's a difference between being unsatisfied and sad.
Yeah. It's normal to be sad about this. Usually, especially if you're playing a heavy narrative game, these characters are basically going to become a part of your soul, honestly. It does for me, and I'm very invested in my characters, but even people who don't get as invested, it becomes a coping thing and a way to bear parts of yourself that you might not otherwise. It hits hard. It basically feels like losing a friend at that point.
And kind of, as we wrap up, there's one thing I want to say about the fulfillment, which we talked about fulfillment a lot here.
Yes.
People talk a lot about some of the most impactful deaths in media being when the character's arc was not cleanly fulfilled.
Yeah.
And I agree with that, but it's not satisfying if none of their arc was fulfilled.
Yes. And it's not as satisfying if someone can't pick it up after and carry that for them, which is a huge narrative tool.
There's talk about, to talk about The Walking Dead again in the early seasons, talk about how it loved how raw it was because it could kill off anyone, because even if their arc wasn't fulfilled, it could kill them off somewhat brutally. And yes, that's true, but like at the same time, they fulfilled some part of their arc.
Yeah.
And
it wasn't meaningless, no matter what.
And their death meant something to someone.
Yeah.
And there are some deaths in that show that I watched for a while that I think are stupid.
Yeah. Sometimes that happens on the part of the writers.
Yeah. And don't be stupid.
Yeah, be smart about it, please. Be considerate about it. Think about your choices.
Anyway, these are a bit of our ramblings about death. If you don't want to...
Help? Hey, maybe don't say that.
Subscribe to us and you'll live forever. Not legally guaranteed.
I don't think that's true. We are not necromancers and or whatever else.
Not yet, we're not.
Not yet, we're not.
But when
Watch me.
When your dream of finally meeting the Briarwoods comes to reality.
Yeah. You don't know what'll happen. They're out there.
If you would like to meet the Briarwoods,
No,
do subscribe to us.
I don't think that's how that works.
Because you can meet them every Saturday.
When we talk about Legend of Vox Machina. And you can hear me yell about how cool I think they are.
In all seriousness, love you guys. Don't die.
Hang in there.
Hang in there.
Cope,
Merry Christmas.
Take care of yourselves. Happy holidays, whatever you're up to.
Happy holidays.
Okay, bye.
Thank you for watching this video from College of Lore. Remember to like this video, subscribe to join the party, and have a fantastic adventure.